Settle in, dear traveler. Find your comfort in the quiet of this moment. Let the world outside fade away like whispers carried on the wind. Beside my crackling fire, with the ancient oak standing guard behind us, we shall journey into a corner of magical history seldom explored. Tonight's tale is not one of great battles or triumphant spells that shake the foundations of castles, but of a quiet, persistent, and infinitely powerful magic. The magic of the heart's deepest desire. We all know the Mirror of Erised, an artifact of immense power, beautiful and terrible in its honesty. It shows us nothing more and nothing less than the most desperate desire of our hearts. A simple promise, yet one so potent that the wisest of wizards have warned against its allure. For it does not dwell on dreams, It does not show the future. It shows only what we cannot have, Many have stood before it. A young orphaned boy saw the loving family he never knew. A powerful headmaster saw his own family, whole and unbroken. It is a siren's call made of silver and glass. But have you ever paused to wonder, in the quiet moments before sleep, who could create such a thing? What mind, what soul, possessed the genius to craft an object that could read the very language of the human heart? And what sorrow, what profound, unending sorrow could possibly fuel such a creation? Our story begins long before the time of Harry Potter, long before even the whispers of a dark lord echoed through the halls of our world. It begins in an age of quieter, deeper magic, an age of artisans. His name was Master Elias Vance. He was not a wizard known for dueling prowess or for inventing flamboyant charms. His name was not etched into the annals of the Ministry of Magic for grand political deeds. No, Elias Vance was a master of a much finer, more intricate art. He was an artificer, a creator of magical objects. But even among his kind, he was unique. His specialty was what he called soul magic, the delicate craft of imbuing objects not just with function, but with feeling, with memory, with emotion. He could craft a music box that didn't just play a tune, but replayed the feeling of the moment it was first opened. He could forge a locket that held not a picture, but the warmth of a loving embrace. His workshop was a library of emotions, a sanctuary of moments captured forever in wood and silver. And enchanted glass. Elias was a quiet man with silver creeping into the hair at his temples, though he was not yet old. His eyes, the color of a stormy sea, held a kindness that was often hidden behind the intense focus of his work. He preferred the company of his tools and the low hum of latent magic to the boisterous crowds of Diagon Alley. His world, his entire universe, was not contained within the enchanted walls of his workshop. It was contained within the smiles of two people, his wife, Lyra, and their daughter, Seraphina. Lyra was his son. Her laughter was a melody that could coax magic from the most stubborn of ingredients. She was a healer, her hands always smelling of dittany and lavender, her presence a balm to any troubled soul. She understood Elias's quiet nature, finding the poetry in his silence, the love in his creations. And Seraphina, she was their starlight, a small, bright girl with her father's thoughtful eyes and her mother's radiant smile. She would spend hours in the workshop, not touching the dangerous tools, but simply watching, mesmerized, as her father coaxed light and life into inanimate things. Her favorite creation was a small wooden bird, when held, would sing the lullaby composed of her mother's hums and her father's whispered words of love. Their life, nestled in a small, ivy-covered cottage on the outskirts of Hogsmeade, was a tapestry woven with threads of quiet joy, deep love, and gentle, everyday magic. It was, in its own way, a perfect creation, a flawless artifact of happiness. And like all perfect things, it was fragile. It began subtly. A weariness in Lyra's eyes that even her strongest potions could not erase. A paleness to Seraphon's cheeks that no amount of sunlight could warm. A magical malady, the healers at St. Mungo's called it. A blight on the soul's own magic, a slow, silent fading of their inner light. It was ancient, untraceable, and utterly incurable. Elias, the master of soul magic, the man who could bottle an emotion, was helpless. He brewed the most complex of potions. He recited the most ancient of incantations. He bartered for the rarest of ingredients. He poured all of his genius, all of his power, not into creation, but into a desperate fight against decay. But this was a magic he could not mend. He watched, day by agonizing day, as the two lights of his life grew dimmer. Lyra's laughter became a soft, tired whisper. Seraphon's little wooden bird lay silent in her weakening hand. The end came on a quiet autumn evening, as the last leaves of gold and crimson fell from the trees outside their window. They passed not in pain, but in peace, as if simply letting go of a long, tiring breath. Together, and Elias Vance, was left alone. The silence in the cottage was no longer peaceful. It was a physical weight, a crushing, suffocating thing that filled every corner, every shadow. The workshop, once his sanctuary, became his tomb. The music boxes were silent. The lockets were cold. Every object, once a testament to his love, was now a monument to his loss. He was a master of capturing, a moments, and now he was a prisoner of them. The weeks that followed blurred into a monotonous gray haze for Elias Vance. Time itself seemed to have fractured, its pieces scattered and sharp. He would wake not to the scent of Lyra brewing morning tea, but to the cold, stagnant air of a house that had lost its soul. He would walk to his workshop, his feet heavy as stone, and stare at his creations, these relics of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. He tried, at first, to channel his grief into his work. He attempted to craft a statue of Seraphina, hoping to capture the exact, playful tilt of her head. But his hands, once so steady and precise, trembled with sorrow. The wood splintered. The magic sputtered and died, refusing his call. His gift, so deeply intertwined with love and joy, was now poisoned by their absence. Grief was a magic he could not command. It was a magic that commanded him. Nights were the cruelest. Sleep offered no escape, only a canvas for nightmares woven from his own powerlessness. He would see Lyra's gentle hands reaching for a healing herb that was not there. Hear Seraphina ask why the wooden bird would no longer sing. He would wake with a gasp, the phantom weight of their hands in his, only to be met with the crushing reality of the empty room. He turned to the tools of a lesser magic, the brute force of memory. The pensieve in his study, a swirling basin of silver mist, became his only solace. Night after night, he would press his wand to his temple, pulling forth the shimmering threads of happier times. He would plunge his face into the mist and be there again. Walking through the forbidden forest on a crisp autumn day, Seraphina held tightly on his shoulders, her small hands tangled in his hair as she pointed at a foraging unicorn. He could feel the crispness of the air, smell the damp earth. He would be in their kitchen, Lyra's face dusted with flour, laughing as she tried to teach him a simple baking charm he was hopelessly inept at. He could feel the warmth of the hearth, taste the sweetness of the apple tarts. But each return to reality was a fresh bereavement. The memories, once a source of warmth, now only highlighted the cold emptiness of the present. They were ghosts, beautiful, perfect, and utterly intangible. He could observe, but he could not interact. He could not feel Lyra's hand close around his. He could not hear a new laugh from Seraphina. He was merely a spectator to his own lost happiness. "It is not enough," he would whisper to the silent workshop, his voice raspy from disuse. "A reflection is not a presence. A memory is not a life." His desperation led him down darker paths into the forbidden sections of his own extensive library. He unsealed tomes bound in dragonhide, their pages brittle with age, filled with the dangerous thoughts of wizards who had sought to bend the fundamental laws of existence. He read of Horcruxes and dismissed them with disgust, a fool's bargain, a mutilation of the soul. He read of Inferi and recoiled, a grotesque mockery of life. He sought not to conquer death, but to defy absence. And then, one night, in a book so old its title had long since faded, he found it. Not a fully formed spell, but a concept. A theoretical branch of magic, so esoteric it was considered a mere myth. The book called it Speculum Desideri, the mirroring of desire. The theory was both elegant and terrifying. It posited that an emotion, if pure and powerful enough, particularly love or the grief that is love's shadow, could be used as a magical catalyst. It could be focused, channeled, and infused into a specially prepared medium, like enchanted glass. The object would not hold a memory, like a pensieve. Instead, it would become a perpetual conduit for the desire itself. It would not show what was. It would show what the heart, in its most secret and desperate chamber, yearned for. A spark ignited in the barren wasteland of Elias's mind. A dangerous, beautiful, terrible spark. He wouldn't be a spectator anymore. He wouldn't just watch. A memory. He would create a window that looked not into the past, but directly into the landscape of his own soul. He would see them not as they were, but as his heart demanded them to be. Alive, whole, and with him. The idea took root, an obsessive flower growing in the graveyard of his hopes. He would create a mirror, the most complex, most powerful, most soul-bound artifact ever conceived. A mirror that would not reflect his tired, grief-stricken face, but the faces of Lyra and Seraphina smiling back at him. He would not just see them. He would be with them. He knew the risks. The ancient text warned of it. The reflection, it read, is a lie, a beautiful, perfect lie. And some men would rather drown in a beautiful lie than swim in the bitter sea of truth. Elias Vance, the master artisan, looked at his trembling hands, no longer seeing them as useless. He saw them as tools for one last desperate creation. He looked at the vast emptiness of his life, no longer seeing it as a void, but as the fuel he would need. "I would drown for a single moment more with them," he whispered to the darkness. And for the first time in months, he walked into his workshop not with despair, but with a terrible, all-consuming purpose. Purpose is a powerful, and often blinding, form of magic. For Elias, it was a shield against the crushing weight of his grief. The emptiness did not vanish, but he now had something to build within it. His workshop, once a tomb of memories, was reborn as a laboratory of desperate hope. The ancient text was more a philosophical treatise than a practical guide. It spoke of principles, not instructions. It outlined the necessary components, not in a neat list, but in poetic, cryptic verses. Elias, with his profound understanding of magical artistry, knew that this was not a simple matter of enchanting glass. Each component of the mirror had to be a vessel of powerful, resonant magic in its own right. He would need to embark on a journey, a pilgrimage to gather the very elements of creation and sorrow. His first quest was for the frame. The text spoke of a wood that knew the slow turning of ages, a wood that had witnessed both the birth and death of stars. There was only one such place he knew, the Whispering Grove, a hidden valley deep within the wilds of Scotland, where ancient Ents had once walked, leaving behind a forest of their petrified kin. These were not trees of common wood, but of a substance that held the echoes of millennia. He traveled for weeks, guided by old maps and the pull of his own magic. The forest was an eerie, silent place. The petrified trees stood like gray, silent giants, their branches frozen and ancient. Gestures. The air was heavy, still, without the rustle of leaves or the song of birds. Here, time itself seemed to be holding its breath. He spent days searching for the perfect specimen, a tree whose graying told a story of 1,000 summers and 1,000 winters. He found it at the heart of the grove, a colossal silver birch, its bark shimmering like frozen moonlight. He did not chop it down. That would be a desecration. Instead, he asked for a gift. He placed his hands upon its cold surface and poured into it the story of his love and his loss. In response, a single large branch detached itself from the trunk with a soft sigh, falling gently at his feet. It was a gift of empathy, a sharing of sorrow from one ancient, lonely thing to another. Next, he needed the glass itself. Not just any enchanted glass, but one that could hold the impossible. The verse spoke of silver weeping under a sorrowful moon. Elias understood. He needed pure silver, mined from the deepest goblin mines, melted not by common fire, but under the light of a full moon during a lunar eclipse. He bartered with the goblins of Gringotts, not with gold, for they had plenty, but with one of his own unique creations, a set of enchanted scales that could weigh not just objects, but the truthfulness of a promise. The goblins, creatures who valued certainty above all, found the offer irresistible. They gave him a heavy pouch of raw, unrefined silver. On the night of the eclipse, he climbed to the highest peak of the tallest Scottish mountain. As the shadow of the earth began to devour the moon, casting a blood-red light upon the world, he began the ritual. He built a fire of yew branches, the wood of both death and eternity, and in a crucible of obsidian, he melted the silver. He chanted in a forgotten tongue, not a spell of power, but a plea, asking the sorrowful, shadowed moon to imbue the liquid metal with its own sense of cosmic loneliness and longing. The silver flowed and shimmered, no longer just a metal, of liquid starlight, liquid sorrow. Finally, he needed the polishing agent. A griffin's tear, shed not in anger, but in grief. The text whispered from its ancient pages. This was the most impossible of tasks. Griffins were proud, fierce creatures, their emotions as wild and untamable as the mountain peaks they called home. Elias did not hunt a griffin. He sought one out, an old, magnificent beast he knew had lost its mate years before to a dragon's. Fire. He found it on a desolate cliffside, staring out at the empty sky. Elias did not approach with a wand or a weapon. He simply sat, a respectful distance away, and for 3 days and 3 nights he did nothing but share his own grief. He did not speak. He simply felt. He projected his own heartbreak, his memory of Lyra and Seraphina, into the air. On the 3rd night, the old griffin turned its eagle-like head and looked at him. In its dark, intelligent eyes, Elias saw a reflection of his own pain. A single pearlescent tear formed at the corner of its eye, rolled down its feathered cheek, and fell onto a patch of moss. Elias collected it in a crystal vial, his heart heavy with a shared, silent understanding. He returned to his workshop a changed man, gaunt, weathered, his eyes holding the ancient silence of the petrified forest and the deep sorrow of a griffin's tear. He laid the 3 components on his workbench: the moon-silvered glass, a branch of the millennial birch, and the vial containing a single perfect tear. The air in the workshop crackled. The quiet objects on his shelves began to hum softly, reacting to the immense, latent power he had brought into the room. The time for preparation was over. The ritual to bind them all, to pour his own soul into the concoction, was at hand. This would be his final and greatest creation. The workshop was sealed, not with locks or chains, but with ancient wards of silence and secrecy. Elias Vance stood in the center of the room, the 3 components laid before him on a slab of polished obsidian. The air was cold, still electric. With anticipation, for this final act, he would not need his wand. This was a magic that came not from a tool, but from the very core of his being. First, he took the ancient branch. Over many days, he carved it, not with a chisel, but with his own focused will, shaping it into an ornate, sweeping frame. He carved into the wood symbols of protection, of memory, and of love. With each line etched, he poured in a memory: Seraphine's first word, Lyra's hand in his on their wedding day, the scent of wildflowers from the meadow behind their cottage. The wood seemed to drink in the emotions, its surface warming under. His touch, its grain glowing with a soft, golden light. Next, he set the moon-silvered glass into the frame. It was cold, inert, its surface cloudy and opaque. It was a blank canvas, waiting for a soul. He then uncorked the crystal vial. The griffin's tear, a single perfect orb of liquid sorrow, hovered in the air for a moment, shimmering with all the colors of a lonely dawn. With a whisper, he guided it to the center of the glass. The moment the tear touched the surface, it did not splash, but dissolved, spreading across the mirror in a wave of ethereal light, clearing its depths until it became as polished and profound as a silent, frozen lake. The mirror was complete. A perfect, beautiful, but empty vessel. Now it needed a heart. It needed his. This was the final, most dangerous part of the ritual, the infusion. Elias stood before the mirror, his reflection a pale, gaunt stranger he barely recognized. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and reached inside himself. He gathered all that was left of his love for Lyra and Seraphina. He gathered the joy of their years together, the crushing weight of their absence, the searing pain of his grief, and the fierce, burning fire of his one, desperate desire to see them again. He channeled it all, a torrent of pure, unfiltered emotion, out of himself and into the mirror. The air in the room grew heavy, the very stone of the walls seeming to groan under the pressure. The candles flickered violently, their flames turning a spectral blue. A wind, born of pure magic, whipped through the sealed workshop. Elias felt himself emptying, hollowing out, as if his very soul was being poured into the cold glass before him. It was an agony beyond words, a sacrifice of his entire being onto the altar of his wish. He felt a sudden, sharp crack, not in the room, but inside his own chest. And then ... silence. The wind died. The candles returned to their gentle, golden flame. The room was still. Elias, drained and trembling, slumped against his workbench, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had survived, barely for a long moment. He could not bring himself to look. What if he had failed? What if all his sacrifice had created was just ... a mirror? Slowly, fearfully, he lifted his gaze. The surface of the mirror was no longer a reflection. It was a window. And through that window, he saw them. Lyra. Her hair was not a memory. It was catching the light. She was turning towards him, a gentle, familiar smile gracing her lips, a look of pure, undiluted love in her eyes. Beside her, Seraphina was holding up the little wooden bird, laughing, the soundless echo of it ringing not in his ears, but in his very soul. They were not ghosts. They were perfect, whole, real. They looked at him as if he had just entered the room, as if he had never been gone at all. A sound, a choked sob, escaped Elias's throat. He reached out a trembling hand, his fingers stopping just shy of the cold. Glass. They were so close. So agonizingly close. He had done it. His beautiful, terrible idea had worked out from that day on. The workshop was no longer empty. He spent every waking moment and many sleepless nights in the company of his mirror. He would bring his meals and eat before them, telling Lyra about his day, though she could not reply. He would read to Seraphina from her favorite storybooks, watching her spectral face light up with joy. He spoke to them, laughed with them, wept with them. The mirror became his world. The world outside, the real world, began to fade. The changing seasons, the letters from old friends, the very need for food and sleep. It all became a dim, unimportant noise. His body grew weaker, his frame more gaunt, but his spirit, he believed, had never been more alive, for it lived inside. The mirror. He did not notice the web of magic that was slowly, gently, irrevocably consuming him. The mirror, born of his desire, now fed on it, pulling him deeper and deeper into its perfect, silent lie. Weeks turned into months. Elias Vance, the once brilliant artisan, became a recluse, a ghost in his own home, tethered to the spectral world within his creation. His body withered, but he did not care, for in his mind he was whole. He was happy. It was an old friend who finally broke the spell. A wise, kind wizard with eyes that twinkled with a perceptiveness that missed little. His name was Albus Dumbledore, though the world would not come to know the full measure of his greatness for many years yet. He had heard worrisome whispers of his old friend's complete withdrawal from the world, and had come to see for himself. He found Elias in the workshop, a skeletal figure bathed in the soft, enchanting light of the mirror, whispering loving words to the silent figures within. Dumbledore did not need to be a master of soul magic to understand the terrible, beautiful tragedy before him. He saw at once that the mirror did not lie in the conventional sense. It told the deepest, most honest truth of a person's heart. And that was precisely what made it so profoundly dangerous. He did not try to shatter the mirror or pull Elias away. He simply sat with his friend, day after day, not speaking of the present, but gently coaxing forth memories of Ilias's own past. Not the memories of Lyra and Seraphina, but of Elias himself, the young, ambitious boy fascinated by magic. They, brilliant student at Hogwarts. The artisan whose greatest joy was not just in loving his family, but in creating things that brought joy to others, that slowly, gently, Dumbledore reminded Elias of the life he had lived before his great love, and the potential for the life that still lay within him, however faint. One evening, as Dumbledore spoke of a complex magical theory, he saw a flicker of the old Elias in his friend's eyes, a spark of intellectual curiosity that had been dormant for so long. It was then that Dumbledore said the words that would finally break the enchantment. "It does not do to dwell on dreams, Elias," he said softly, his voice full of compassion, "and forget to live. Lyra and Seraphina, they would not want this life for you. Their deepest desire would be for you to find peace, to live again." The words struck Elias with the force of a physical blow. He looked from his friend's kind face to the perfect, silent figures in the mirror. For the first time, he saw the truth. He saw the stillness in their eyes, the fixed nature of their smiles. It was a perfect moment, frozen in time, but it was. Not life. Life was messy, imperfect, and it moved forward. He had created an anchor to the past, and it was drowning him. With a final, heart-wrenching sob, he turned away from the mirror. The pain was immense, a fresh wave of grief. But this time, it was different. It was a cleansing pain, a pain that marked an ending, not a perpetual present. He knew what he had to do. The mirror was too powerful, too seductive to be kept. But it was also his masterpiece, a testament to the greatest love he had ever known. He could not bring himself to destroy it. Together, he and Dumbledore decided on its fate. It would be taken to Hogwarts, a place of learning and of great wisdom. There, it would be hidden, protected by powerful enchantments, to be used not as a permanent solace, but as a tool for teaching the most difficult of lessons, the nature of desire, and the strength it takes to turn away from it. With his last reserves of strength, Elias helped his friend transport the heavy mirror to the castle. As they placed it in a forgotten, disused classroom, Elias touched the frame one last time. He did not look at his own reflection. He simply whispered, "Goodbye. My loves, be at peace." Returning to his cottage, A profound sense of calm settled over him. He was empty, yes, but he was no longer consumed. That night, for the first time in over a year, Elias Vance slept without dreams. He'd passed away peacefully a few weeks later, his work complete, his soul finally free to rejoin the ones he had so desperately longed for. Asterisk. And so, the Mirror of Erised remained, a silent guardian of a heartbreaking story, a testament to a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death, a quiet reminder, hidden in the castle's depths, that our desires show us what we are, but our choices show us who we are not now. Dear listener, let the echoes of this story fade. Let the deep magic of it settle into your own heart. Your own journey for tonight is coming to an end. There is nothing more to learn, nothing more to see. There is only the gentle darkness, the soft comfort of your bed, and the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. Feel the weight of your body becoming heavy, peaceful, sinking gently into rest. The creator of the mirror has found his peace. And now, it is time for you to find yours. Sweet dreams, dear traveler. May you find nothing but the deepest, most restful slumber.